Alright, welcome back. So in this video, we are going to see the last thing about the functions that you need to know, which is returning a variable, right? So what do you mean by returning a variable in the first place, right? We have studied everything in a function. We know how to do things and we know how to give it values. So what returning variables basically means is taking values back from the function, right? What do I mean? I'll make a new file again and I'll save this as returning.html. I'll make another file. I'll save this as returning.javascript. Alright. And I'll do all my standard things here. I'm not going to list them out this time. You should be quite comfortable with them until now. Alright, so now my HTML is ready. Only thing left is the script tag. I do src returning.js. And now I can open this up. And I have this weird looking heading here. Alright. So first of all, you can see in the heading, I've written returning values. So that is actually quite good thing in itself, that what you actually return is values from the function, right? So, and basically now we are going to see how to return values from a function. But again, returning is basically the concept behind it is something that you should understand to the core too, because we'll be exporting things later on in the back end. And that has a similar concept, like what you should know. So what returning means is, let's say I have a function here and it says add. So we'll make a meaningful function this time and not just something that console.logs it. And in here we are going to take two arguments, which are a and b, right? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to return a plus b. Or first, let's just store this in another variable, a plus b, right? And I'm going to have another function which says check even, right? And I'm going to give it an argument named num, and I'll do if. So now I'll make a variable which is c, right? And I'll do var c. I'll do if num mod 2 equal to 0, c is equal to true, else c is equal to false, right? And I'll add a comment in here for what they're basically doing. So this is obviously a function to add two numbers that are passed as arguments, right? And this is a function. Oh, you don't know return, so yeah, of course. So a function to check if the number passed as an argument is even or odd, right? So this is what these two functions are doing, right? And now let's do our main thing. We'll get a variable. We'll get something like first is equal to enter first number, and I'll do another prompt saying enter second number, and I'll store it in a variable named second, right? And alright, So now I want a variable. So what I'm basically trying to do is I'll add these two numbers, then I'll print even sum if the sum is even, and I'll print odd sum if the sum is odd, right? So by reading this comment, you might have figured out that this is actually quite easy to do without functions too. But what I'm trying to show you here is, returning through functions. So of course we'll have functions, right? Yeah, so what we're going to do now is we are going to get the sum through this function up here, and we're going to check through this function right here. So first I need the sum in here. So I can do add first, second, and then I need to check this in this function, right? I need to pass the result that I'm getting in this, basically this variable, into this function to check whether it is even or odd. So how do I do that? Because I know that C is inside this function add, it has a local scope and it cannot be used outside. So how will I manage that? So here's where returning comes in, right? So if I put a comment here again, return, basically return is the keyword that we'll use. You'll see what that is. So if I try to define return in very crude language, I can say used to send back values from the function, right? And back is the main thing here, that we are giving values to the function from our main flow through an argument, right? And if we want to get something back to our main flow like this from our function, what we can use is the return. So what I can do here is return C. So now I'm returning this value from the function, and like you could consider this to be a catching game. So here this main flow of the code, this line 19 is calling add, and this is basically throwing first and second at this add function right here, and this add function is catching these two variables in two of its own variables named a and b, right? Yeah, and so now this function is throwing back a value of C, and we need to catch that value in that main flow. So how you can do that is you can do b is equal to, or if you want to store it in a variable named sum, so you can do variable sum is equal to add first second, and now I'll just first console.log sum, right? So a lot of code already done and we haven't actually seen what's happening, so let's go there. I'm getting a prompt saying enter first number, so I'll say, let's say 12. I'll refresh my page, 12, and second number is 13, and if I inspect, I go to the console. Of course these are strings, made this error myself, right? So I'll have to pass them, and this goes here, right? And it says enter first number, I'll enter 12, enter second number 13. So I'm getting 25 here, which is 12 plus 13. So basically I added the thing in here, I returned C, I caught the returning value in a variable named sum, and I printed that sum and I got what I wanted to, right? So we can see that here C is successfully returned to sum, and that is basically all that return is, right? You could return anything, it could be a variable, right? It could be a constant value. You could do return 4 if you always wanted to return 4 from something, right? So that is not a problem. But of course you can return one thing at a time, and you can also return arrays, that is not a problem, right? So now I'll do a similar thing in the check event. So if we see here, the next thing we have to do is we have to call this check even function and do something with that, right? First of all, I'll add something to this description here, saying that returns true if number is even, returns false if number is odd, right? So this thing here is going to return true if the number is even and false if the number is odd. And you can see I've set this variable c to be true if the number is even by checking its divisibility with 2, and else I've set it to false. So all I can do later is I can return c. So basically now the complete functionality of this has been achieved. So what I can do now, if check even sum, then I can then I can do console.log even sum. And this one thing that you're seeing right here, if check even sum, right? So this is another use of return. You could do something like var check, let's say the variable is check, and you could get that in a variable like this, right? And then you could put that check in here. So now this check variable is getting a value back from the check even, which is basically what we're returning here. And we are seeing if that's true or false, because we can see the value being returned up here is a Boolean value. So you can simply write if check will be true here, this will be if will be executed, if check is false, else will be executed, right? And what you saw earlier, this is another way of writing that. So what will happen here is this check even sum will be called, the value that is returned will directly be substituted here. So if true is returned, this will become if true, right? And this will be different if you're calling it multiple times, of course, depending on what the function returns, right? So I can do console.log even sum. Here I can do console.log odd sum. Now if I go back and I'll refresh my page again, right? Enter first number. So my first number is, let's say, 13. Next is 14. I get odd sum because 13 plus 14 is 27. If I refresh my page, first number is 12, second is 14. I get even sum, right? So this is basically all that I wanted to show you in return. So what you can do is you can return a value from a function and you can catch that value in another variable, right? And you know the var check is equal to check even sum thing that I showed you, and that will have same effect as this. There's no difference between these two, and this is just a way of writing that, right? Yeah, so this is what returning means, taking values back from a function, right? Yeah, so that's all for this video. I'll see you in the next one.